English accent. That's why Alvin was laughing when I was Malaysian. I'll tell you a little bit of my heritage. I'll tell you a few stories, and then I'm going to ask you some questions, and then you can ask me anything you want. Does that sound like a good deal?
That's good.
And if I fall asleep, it's because I got off the plane from London this morning. Okay, so it's currently 5 a.m. or something. So I'll do my best. Okay, I'm going to show you. Oh yeah, here we go. Oh yes, good. I want to tell you about my ancestors. So my dad was born in Klang. He lived in a house on 3 Jalan Kilat. Has anyone ever been to Klang? Yeah, come on, good. And my dad's dad was born in Sri Lanka because he's Sri Lankan Tamil. And my mum, she was born in India. And my mum's mum was Indian. And my mum's dad, well, he's in this picture. Which one is he? Well, he's not the tiger. This is a man-eating tiger that had been marauding in the villages of the Assam region of India. And my grandfather was an Irishman. So he's the guy on the right with the pith helmet, the colonial pith helmet, that's what he's wearing. And he was really good with a rifle. So every time there was a man-eating tiger, they called him in and he would kill it. And this wasn't a trophy killing, he wasn't doing this for sport, he was doing this for protection. And then the Second World War broke out. And my grandfather signed up to fight against the Nazis in North Africa, in El Alamein. And he was providing covering fire for his troops, and they all got out, but no one, it seems, provided covering fire for him. So he died in the desert, and one day I hope to visit his grave. He was awarded a military cross by the Queen, and this was a big deal. This is the second highest medal of valor that you could receive. But my mother and her 2 sisters, one of whom never met her father because my grandmother was pregnant when my grandfather went to the front to fight. These 3 girls were separated from each other and separated from their mother and sent to 3 different orphanages in India. And you might be going, well, why are they in orphanages? They have a living parent. Well, it might surprise you that most of the children in orphanages around the world actually have living parents. They're not orphans. It's often poverty, disability, or some other kind of social stigma that means that they are not living with their birth families. If you want to talk about orphanages, I have a whole other talk about that, but that's another story. But my mother was in an orphanage because she was the wrong race. She was half Irish and half Indian. And today in Britain we'd say you had diverse heritage. But back then, they would use a horrible phrase. They would say you were half caste. Yeah. And so you were socially unacceptable. And so my mother and her 3 sisters grew up in 3 different orphanages in India, and then a grand aunt in Brighton, England, heard about them and decided to bring them over to the UK, reunite the family. Wow. And my mother, at age 16, decided that she was going to train to be a nurse, to give something back to society. And so there she was, a nurse's uniform. She'd go up to the Brighton General Hospital, and then some of the patients wouldn't let my mother touch them. Could we have a white nurse, please? We don't want a brown nurse. I don't know what they thought. I wonder if they thought the brown would somehow come off. People would throw a banana at my mother in the street and tell her to go black home to her own country. Aren't racists clever? They were surprised that my mum knew how to use a knife and a fork because they thought that in India she'd grown up in the jungle, like Mowgli from Jungle Book. So can you imagine being 16 and having that kind of racism and xenophobia? But my mother was an incredible woman. She decided to fight a one-woman resistance campaign to racism. And what she would do is on a Friday night, she would cook a big vat of curry and rice and open the front door, and anyone who felt like they didn't fit in was welcomed around my mother's breakfast table. And so lots of other international students and other people would come and just have a little oasis of hope and help. It was beautiful. One of the young men that came to visit was a dashing young Malaysian student. He was supposed to be studying engineering, but ended up studying cricket and my mother. And they fell in love and got married, had babies, and here I am. But my mother's commitment to fighting hostility with hospitality has become the defining story of our lives. And I didn't know it until later in my life, but I now realise that's what's happened, that from the beginning, my mother had this huge heart to welcome people. Sometimes they got us into trouble. I remember one night, I was about 14 years old, there was a knock at the front door, and it's 11 o'clock at night, and my mum gets to the door ahead of me, and she was small, and I'm small, but she's really small, and she opened the front door, and this huge German man was filling the entire door frame. And he said, "Does Natalie live here?" And we're going, "No." And he said, "Well, I've just arrived into Gatwick Airport, and I was talking to a girl on the plane, and in a lovely journey together. And then when I was going through customs, I realised I had something to declare. My undying love for Natalie." And this is before there was Snapchat or WeChat or Instagram. And so all I know is that Natalie is from Brighton. There's 100,000 homes in Brighton. I don't know how many houses he'd been to before he got to our house, but he was going to knock on every single door until he found Natalie. So at this point, I wanted to shut the front door. Weird German stalker guy does not need to come and have tea with us. But my mother says, "Oh, that's an interesting story. You better come in." So there he is in our lounge, having good Indian tea, probably from Assam, and he's telling us more about this story. And by the time he's finished the story, it's like midnight. And my mum says, "Well, it's too late for you to go door knocking now. You'd better stay here for the night." So the sofa in our front lounge turned into a bed, and my mum found him some pyjamas, and there he was in our front lounge. Now that was good for him, but bad for me, because my bedroom, when I was a teenager, was opposite the lounge. And so I closed the door, and then I took every single bit of furniture that I could move, and I barricaded the door, and I went under the covers, and I had a Swiss Army knife. Have you seen those? Yeah? And I thought, okay, I'm okay. If he's going to come after me, I've got my knife for protection. I didn't really think about the rest of my family, but I thought I was okay. Somehow I fell asleep, and then I wake up, and it's the next morning, I check myself, and I'm all still here. It's amazing. And I moved the barricade, and all I could hear was German snoring from the lounge. Anyway, he was fine, we were fine, and my mum cooks him a big breakfast and sends him on his way. And I'm a romantic. I like to believe that somewhere in the world there's a woman called Natalie with a very tall German husband. And when they tell their story of how they got together, they have to tell about a little Indian woman from Brighton who believed in love. My mum was fantastic. She's passed away now from cancer, but she set a model for our family about hospitality. And it's become a defining feature not just of our family life, but of my professional life. So Alva mentioned that I'm involved in the area of adoption and fostering and child welfare reform. I'll tell you a couple of things about that. But I also work with refugees. I'll tell you about the adoption and fostering, I'll tell you about refugees, and then this is all going to tie in with a question of credibility. How much credibility does the church have here in Malaysia and where I'm from in England? And is there anything that we can do to change the narrative of that? And I believe that hospitality is the way that we do that. Does that make sense? Okay. Let me see if I can do that this way. Oh yeah, okay. I'm going to come to that. All right, let me tell you the adoption story, how I ended up working for the government, and then how I got involved with refugees. I hope by telling my story, it helps you see mission slightly differently in a way that might help spread the credibility of the gospel and of our God. So my wife and I, we met at Warwick University, not long after we'd met, not long before we'd met Alvin, and I was studying chemistry with medicinal chemistry, and my wife, well, she was just a friend, Miriam was studying German with international studies. And I had 35 hours of contact time with my lecturers and labs in a week, and I was going to get my undergraduate degree. And my wife Miriam, she only had 4 hours. If you haven't yet decided what to study at university, don't study as science, because you have a lot of work. And they give out degrees to people with art subjects. It's incredible. Anyway, so we got married. We were cross-cultural missionaries in Albania, and we handed over to Albanian leadership, and then we came back to the UK, and I started to work for a church. And by the grace of God, we had 3 babies in 3 years, and we were under 30. Okay, and we weren't necessarily aiming for that. We were very blessed. That was wonderful. If you're not quite sure how that happens, Alvin does a great seminar about this with diagrams and everything. You can figure that out for yourself. And I thought that's it. We, as a family, have contributed to population growth. 2.2 kids you need to have for replacement, don't you? But we had 3, so we're ahead of the game. This is all good. I thought we were done. And then my wife says to me, "Hey, why don't we consider fostering or adoption?" And I thought, that is a great idea for other people. Because there's a real advantage in having your children close together. I don't know if you've thought this through. If God blesses you with children, having them close together is a really good thing, because if they come into your household together, it's possible at some stage they might kind of leave your household together, might they? They might go to work or university or who knows, right? And then it will be me and my wife again, like the old days. We could go on kind of romantic walks along the beach, just the 2 of us. We live near Oxford, which if you look at a map of England is as far away from the beach as it's possible to get. But we could commute to the beach. I'm open, right? Or in Europe, couples do city breaks. Have you heard of this idea? City breaks. Oh, I'll just pop over to Copenhagen for the weekend. And I thought, oh, we could do that. Like couples, we could do the couple thing. Beach one Sunday, Copenhagen another weekend. This is all going to be great. And then my wife's saying, fostering and adoption. And I'm thinking, that's going to spoil all my plans. Walking along a beach, pulling a toddler, that's not quite as romantic. Or Copenhagen with nappies and a baby, maybe not as fun. Anyway, then 3 things happened to me, and one of them is an occupational hazard if you're a Christian. Probably it's happened to you. God spoke to me through the Bible. Does that happen from time to time? I don't know how I'd missed it, but God really, really cares about vulnerable children. Have you noticed? Yes. It's like nearly every other page, particularly in the Old Testament, but in the New Testament too, God keeps bringing up 3 groups of people that He's particularly asking us to care for. The widow, the orphan, and the definition of orphan in the Old Testament is a child not living under the protection of their father. Okay? It doesn't mean that both parents are dead. So the widow, the orphan, and the stranger, those are the 3 that over and over God keeps saying, if you really want to worship me, it's not just about the singing. If you want to read a really, really scary passage of the Bible, Isaiah 1 is probably the bit that you want to, just have a look at. Because God says, I've had enough with your religious meetings. I don't even want you to pray anymore. Why not? Because you have not sought justice or pled the cause of the widow and the orphan. So it's almost like God saying, there's no point meeting as churches if you don't care about the people that I care about. I find that really quite scary. Or if you're more of a New Testament person, I don't know why you would be, it's all inspired by God, but do you know James chapter 1 verse 27? Religion that God our Father accepts as pure and blameless is a kicking worship band on a Sunday morning, biblically sound preaching on a Sunday morning, an hour and a half quiet time, or 3 hours a month of solid prayer. All good things, but not actually what God says is important. Weirdly. Now, if you wanted to check someone's spiritual health, maybe you're a pastor, and you want to check the spiritual health of your congregation, you're probably looking for church attendance, how much they give, maybe, and whether they've got a consistent prayer life. Those are good things to be testing, but when God summarises his priority for worship, religion that God our Father accepts as pure and blameless is to care for widows and orphans in their distress. Now, what do you mean? Why is that the most important thing? It's because God loves everybody, but shows particular attention for the vulnerable. Amen. And therefore, if we're going to follow in God's footsteps, if we're going to be close to him, his concerns become our concerns. So that was the first thing that happened to me. The second thing that happened to me was that some friends of mine in their 60s became foster parents to teenagers for the first time. And that challenged me. I thought, if these guys can do that in their 60s, maybe we should be willing to do this in our 30s. And the third thing that happened was I read about the statistics. Children that don't grow up in a loving family, that enter in a care system, or even worse, institutional care like orphanages, tend to have really terrible life outcomes. It's not surprising, is it? There are wonderful examples of children that kind of buck the trend, but statistically, they're more likely to end up homeless. In Britain at one stage, over 50% of our prison population were young people that had grown up in the care system and then aged out. So you're more likely to end up homeless, criminalised, or exploited. And the exploitation was pretty bad. So in some parts of the UK, 70% of female sex workers are young girls that have aged out of foster care. Now the church normally cares about prisons. We do prison ministry. Prison Alpha is amazing. Or we do work amongst the homeless. That's fantastic, isn't it? We want to help the homeless. We're on feeding programs, and job creation programs, brilliant. And we're often trying to stop human trafficking and exploitation. Brilliant. Why wait until a system has chewed you up and then spat you out before you get involved? A lot of those people would have loved a family when they were 3 or 4 years old. And maybe by the grace of God, their life outcome, their life trajectory would have been different. Prevention is normally better than cure. So those three things happened, and then we were in. We thought we should become foster parents. I'll tell you what happened, because it's quite funny. This is a long time ago, but I did this. Well, I can't hold the microphone and do it at the same time. But some of you are too young to know what I'm doing. You think I'm a DJ, don't you? This is how you used to make a telephone call back in the last century. Because we used to have phones that used to have to plug into walls. Do you remember them? They're amazing. Anyway, so we phoned up. We phoned up our local fostering agency, and we said, "Hey, it's Mr. and Mrs. Kandiah here. We're thinking about fostering or adoption." And I thought they would play a little fanfare, you know. "Yes, we're so happy that you've called. We've been longing for someone to call. We've got loads of children you can help with. Just tell us a little bit about yourself." Oh no, that's not how it went. The first question we got was, "How many rooms in your house?" And I'm like, "I've got loads of rooms. We've got a bathroom, we've got a kitchen." No. Wait. "How many people are you already in your house?" "Well, that would be 5. "How many bedrooms do you have?" "Well, that will be 3. "You're no good to us." Oh man, that wasn't what I thought would happen. So I had to dial again. And this time I thought maybe I confused the person at the other end by saying we wanted to do fostering or adoption. I'll tell you what, we'll just say adoption, that would be easier. So I said, "Okay, we want to be adoptive parents." And they said, "Okay, tell us about your ethnicity." And I thought, I've got this, haven't I? I'm pretty good at ethnicity. Well, dad's from Malaysia, my dad's from Sri Lanka, my mum's dad's Irish, and my mum's Indian, and my wife's half English, and the other half of her is Welsh. How many boxes have you got left? To which they said, we'll never find an ethnic match for you, you're no good to us. So we failed in every way we could to become adoptive parents. We were put off at every level. And then we moved house. I got a job at Oxford University teaching Anglicans, like this church, about mission. And I'm a Baptist, so that was quite a tough thing to do. God's bigger than Anglicanism or baptism, but anyway, we had a lot of fun. They wouldn't let me talk about baptism until the students were just about to graduate. I figured they thought it was too late to change their minds, right, at this stage, so I was safe. But anyway, this house, it came with 3 bedrooms and a dining room. Do you know what a dining room is? Do you have dining rooms? Who needs a dining room? You only need the dining room when the King of England is popping round for tea. And despite popular opinion, that really rarely happens in our house. So we converted the downstairs dining room to a downstairs bedroom. And then we were ready to make the call again. How many rooms in your house? Oh, we got 4 bedrooms and 3 kids. It's like, oh, brilliant. Anyway, we became foster parents, and that was 17 and a half years ago. We've had 30 children come and live with us. Some have stayed for a night, but one has stayed for 17 years. And she's our adopted daughter. So we now have 6 children. So 3 birth children, 1 adopted daughter, and 2 long-term foster children. And I tell you, it has changed our lives in all the best ways possible. Just while we're here, let me say that in terms of resilience, how do you keep going in ministry? For me, working professionally in the area of child welfare reform, the thing that keeps me going is what I call the power of proximity. So at 6 o'clock in the evening, around my dinner table, there are 5 children. One of them's left now, he's gone to university to do his PhD. But there are 5 children still left in my house. We're not doing city breaks to Copenhagen, but I'm totally fine with that. I'm enjoying life because I'm seeing 3 of these kids that have had really, really difficult backgrounds. I'm seeing them flourish every time we have dinner. And that proximity with them, seeing the change in their life, drives me out to want to go and change the world for the rest of the kids. So if you're finding you're losing your sense of vision, compassion, your energy to help those that need you the most. And some people say you need to take time out. I think actually it's the opposite. I think you need to take time in. Often in ministry, the longer you're in it, the higher up the kind of managerial ladder you go. It happens with the school teachers too, isn't it? The school teachers become school teachers because they love children, but the longer they're school teachers, the further away from children they get, because they end up in management. And that's not where the energy comes from. So lean in, get close to the people that you're trying to serve. If the people you're trying to serve are just numbers on a spreadsheet, or people in the distance on a Sunday morning, or followers on Twitter or Instagram, then you're going to lose energy very quickly. But if they're people that you do life with, that will keep you going. Does that make sense? Yes. You see it with Jesus, you know. Jesus tried to take time out, didn't he? He was away from everybody, and then everyone kept following him, and then it said, oh man, they're hungry. And Jesus looked at them, he said, they're like sheep without a shepherd. His compassion came back, didn't it? As he spent time with the people that he was serving. So if that was true for Jesus, how much more is that true for us? Okay, so that's part 1 of my life. Part 2, I'm going to talk about, and then I've got a couple of questions for you, and then you can ask me loads of questions. So, I felt called to try and change the way, not just our family related to vulnerable children, but the way the church relates to vulnerable children. I took those Bible verses very seriously, James 1:27, Isaiah 1. You can multiply them throughout the Old Testament, but those 2 might give you a bit of, I guess, some footholds in the scriptures to hold on to. And I thought, there's about 5,000 children in the UK that don't have adoptive families that need them. and there's 9,000 foster carers that we're missing. We don't have enough foster carers. So I thought, I'm in a job which gives me regular contact with churches on Sunday morning and throughout the week. There's 20,000 of them. I wonder if we could inspire every church to find one new foster parent or one new adoptive parent, and for the rest of the church to wrap around them. Then we could meet the entire need. And I wouldn't have to ask every Christian to adopt 10 children. I just need one new family to foster or adopt, the rest of the church to wrap around them, and we can do it. And that became the driving ambition. We started a charity and a movement around this. Anyway, after many years, the government asked me to chair a board for them, not just to help the church deal with adoption and fostering, but to help the nation deal with fostering and adoption. And I was torn a little bit because I didn't actually agree with a lot of the policies that this government actually were promoting. This is the same government that has pretty Islamophobic members of its constituency. It's the same government that wants to send refugees to Rwanda rather than deal with them in the UK. So I'm not a fan of a lot of the policies of this government. But they're asking me to fix something. And it's actually something I believe needs fixing, and this government needs fixing. So we've got overlapping ambition. I'm going to lean in there. And I don't have to baptise and bless the rest of the government policy, but on this, we can partner. And so I chaired this board for the government. That was complicated though, because you can't work for a charity that's lobbying government and work for the government at the same time. That's called a conflict of interest. And so I had to quit the charity that I founded, Home for Good, in order to work for the government on adoption. And the people that inspired me to even think about it in some small way were Daniel and Esther. They had a government-facing role, even though they didn't necessarily agree with the government. I'm pretty sure Daniel was not a fan of Nebuchadnezzar's government, because Nebuchadnezzar had Daniel forcibly removed from Israel and taken in captivity, and then he was forced to learn all this kind of Babylonian magical, dark arts stuff. And if you didn't obey him, you had to bow down to a massive gold statue or get burnt alive. I don't think if there had been an election, Daniel would have voted for him. But there was an opportunity to be a civil servant and to be a godly influence, and so he took it. And that was my feeling. Oh, I think I ought to. All right, I'll tell you about the refugees in a minute. But could we flip to the other? Is that going to work? Okay, I'm going to do a bit of interaction with you. You ready? You're going to need a phone and get your camera of your phone out, and then we've got a little game. Sorry, I should have given you some warning because there's a bit crossover. We're going to use something called Mentimeter. Go on, it's going to happen. And you're going to take a picture of the QR code, and then I've got a few questions for you, and they're on it. It's going to be great. All right, you tell me when it comes back, and then we can do it. Oh. Yes. Okay. So can you QR code that? And when you're in, press the thumbs up button, and that tells me that I know that you're in. Yeah, look at that. Very good. Apparently the colours don't relate to what football team you like or what political party you want to vote for. Well done. I think you're in. You're in.